Hello everyone, my name is Owen Gotimer. I'm the community manager at TechWell, and I'm joined today by Bob Foster. Bob's a technical manager at Coveros. Bob, thanks for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So Bob and I are in Las Vegas, and we are going to talk today about an Agile Manifesto principle, and that principle reads, working software is the primary measure of progress. Bob, do you want to talk to me a little bit about what that Agile principle means?
Yeah, I mean, typically, notice it says working software and not complete software. Because a lot of times, especially in Agile, you're not going to complete a whole piece of functionality within a sprint. 2 or 3 weeks is just not enough time. So you break it up into smaller pieces of functionality that you can deliver, and it doesn't necessarily need to be complete. You might find yourself at times spending too much time on the last 10% of a story when really that 90% will get you much further. And so you push that 10% off to another sprint. You concentrate on getting whatever the functionality is that you need to get done in a sprint. And so how do you measure that progress? And what is working software? And if it has a bunch of bugs, or if the performance of that software isn't very well, or it's poor performance, that's not going to be considered working software in most cases, unless you have worked that out with the client ahead of time. So I think it's important what you're delivering is transparent to the end user. You've agreed upon what's being delivered, and what is delivered works well, performs well. It's been tested by the end user and they've approved it. And then you move on to the next sprint, and maybe you work on completely different pieces of the functionality, or you continue to build on what you've already written. And if you have to refactor code to do that, that's all part of Agile. So it's really getting something done that works, and it works well.
Yeah, and I think that's super important. I think something you bring up that's also super important is that clear understanding with the product owner or the customer about what it is that they're expecting for you to deliver.
Right. So
that you can deliver what they're expecting.
Right. And I think transparency and feedback is the two, in my opinion, the two most important things of Agile. You need to be transparent in what you're giving. You need to have an understanding between yourselves, the testers, the end user, as to what's the definition of done, or what's the definition of working software, and you work towards that goal. And the end user needs to be a part of this process, because they're the ones that are accepting it at the end. And if they don't approve it, we can always go back to what we've agreed upon, but really it's small increments moving forward, and the understanding that this is what you're getting this sprint, this is what you're getting next sprint. And if it changes, if the client says what we have is good enough, let's move on to something new, then you do that as well. You don't want to spend a whole bunch of time doing the extra nice to haves if maybe they don't need it, or they don't deem it as important after seeing what is already there.
Right, yeah, that's awesome. And I think that incremental piece is so important. So when you're working with, when you're trying to get to working software and following this Agile principle, what are some signs that you might see that a team or a company isn't following through with this particular principle?
There are a few signs. One is, say that the end user doesn't really want to participate in what they're receiving, or they don't want to participate as much in the requirements of what you're getting. Then there's really no way to decide or determine this is what you wanted and this is the working software that you wanted. So again, the participation of an end user is really important in figuring out what that success criteria is for a story. Another thing that I've experienced is when a client isn't really paying attention to what they're actually being delivered, but they're paying attention more to the velocity that they've enforced on a team. So, velocity is really a measurement of how much work you can get done in a sprint. and each development team will determine a velocity. Each development team may determine velocity differently. A 1-point story for me may be different for a 1-point story of another development team. And in one situation, it was told to the team, which had 7 different development teams, each individual needs to deliver 2 points per day of a sprint. And so that means you deliver X amount of points at the end of the sprint, and if that amount of points is not delivered to us, then we don't accept the sprint. And in that case, they've gone completely away from, they don't even care what they're receiving, they just care about a value that really has nothing to do with what you're delivering. And it can lead to inflation of points, it can lead to a lot of things that could be negative, and it also leads to not getting as much work done as you possibly could. So that's just some ways you can tell, hey, we're not on track here. We're not following the belief that working software is our primary measure of success or progress. It's the number of points you're giving us.
Right, and obviously to your point there, you could turn in 100 points and still not have working software, or you could turn in 2 points or 1 point and you have working software. And what's more valuable to the customer is working software.
Right.
So, so when you are working with a client or working with a team that has not followed through on this principle, what are some steps you might be able to take initially to kind of get them on board with the communication and the understanding of this is what we should be working towards?
I think the biggest step, and it's going to go back to transparency and feedback, is getting everyone on the same page. Saying, hey, listen, maybe we started off on the wrong foot, but take a step back, explain what Agile is, explain what velocity means, explain that we're all trying to get the same solution here at the end, and we all need to be on the same page. So having a client be a part of meetings, having a client be a part of requirements and acceptance, and having their feedback heard, I think is one of the most powerful things. So I believe, like, if a client says, hey, I've user tested all your stories, it all looks good, but I found these 3-4 things, and you say, okay, we're gonna get those done in the next sprint, and in addition to what you've already have scheduled in the backlog, you fix or change what they've requested, what they gave to you, that gives them, okay, they're listening to us and they're doing what we want, and they did it without a fuss. And being able to just all be on the same page and understand the process and understand we're all on the same team trying to get this work completed to you, that's the most important thing.